Circle is the nonprofit programming arm of Charis Books. And Charis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. So welcome. To be here with all of you, physically in this space and virtually as well. We're here tonight to celebrate the Sex Talk, a Muslim's Guide to Healthy Sex and Relationships. And Sabrina does have a question for folks who are physically in the space. If anyone is not comfortable with having your photo taken, if you could raise your hand just so that we can make sure to exclude you from pictures, because otherwise we do want to document this beautiful occasion. But we will be sure to exclude anyone who is not comfortable with that. We are really, really honored to get to celebrate this book, this gathering with our friends, our new friends from Heart. So we are here tonight with Nadiah, with Hadi, and with Alia to celebrate. And so I'm going to actually turn it over to Alia first.
Thank you so much. So I also want to thank Charis and the other co-sponsors of this event, SisterLove and Raksha, and all of you all for being here, both in person and virtually. And if the representatives from both of our co-sponsoring organizations want to come up and say a few words, please do so. Or the mic will be brought to you.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Oh, we'll do together.
No, way too long. Well, greetings, everyone. Good evening. Everybody, I said everyone. Good evening. Yes, give thanks. I'm Dazon Dixon-Jallow, founder and president of SisterLove Incorporated, which is based here in Atlanta. Also SisterLove International in South Africa. So in Atlanta, we're 33 years old, and in South Africa, we're 23 years old. Focused on sexual reproductive health rights and justice at the intersections of things like HIV, gender-based violence, women's rights, human rights in particular. And I'm just so thrilled. I'm so thrilled, not only for Heart, but for the book, to see my friend Nadiah in Atlanta. It's an amazing evening, and it's our absolute pleasure to co-sponsor this afternoon and this evening with you all, and thank y'all for being here.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. So good to see you. My name is Aparna Bhattacharya. I'm the executive director of Raksha, which means protection in many South Asian languages. And our mission is to promote a stronger and healthier South Asian community through confidential support services, education, and advocacy. And at the end of the day, we're working towards healing, empowerment, and justice for survivors. What a gift to be here with Heart and SisterLove, amazing partners, and so proud of the work that we all do collectively in our communities for our communities and for a just world. And yeah, we've been around 27 years and love partnering with Charis. This has been a long-term relationship, and it's one of my favorites. So thank you all. I hope you enjoy it. This is such an important topic that we're talking about. Whether you're Muslim, whether you're Hindu, the sex talk is so important in our communities, and we got to find ways. I've had parents ask me about it, so this is our way of creating conversations that we don't normally have. Thank you.
Oh, well, we're going to get started then. Again, thank you both, authors, Nadiah Mohajir and Dr. Ceesay. I know that you all have been doing this work for quite a bit of time, but I was wondering if we could just start with the story of how you got into this world and into this work, and the story of how this book came to be.
Okay, I'll start. Hi everyone, my name is Hadi, and I am one of the co-authors of the book. So I have like a public health background. I think coming from Gambia, there's been so much stigma around, just talking about sex and sexuality in general, and I've always been like a very inquisitive child. So when I got to college, I took my first public health class, and I remember they were distributing condoms and stuff like that. I was like, oh, this is interesting. I was like every Muslim kid pre-med, and then when I discovered like just the many different ways in which we can help people that doesn't have to be the medical route, I instantly gravitated towards public health and just issues around women and gender and sexuality, because like even with pre-med, my intention was to be an OBGYN, because initially that's the only way I thought like I could, you know, help girls and women. But so I've been doing I've done nonprofit for like my entire life. And then in 2017, one of my friends in college introduced me to Nadiah, and it was literally one of the best things to ever happen to me. And yeah, so I started interning with Heart, and the relationship just grew from there. So was it 2020 when you reached out to me about the book? I was so excited, because like for me, it's like anything Heart is involved in, I'm like, yes, please. So the fact that like, you know, she even thought about me was really, really, really wonderful. And you know, a couple of years later, here we are with easily one of the best things I've ever done. And I'm just really thankful.
Thank you, Hadi. She's being humble right now. She wrote this book while writing her dissertation. Sorry. She did this while she was doing her dissertation on.
Oh yeah, so my research is on sex education policy. So more around in low and middle income countries, and just in low and middle income context, with like, you know, just looking at how sex education can be catered to a non-white, you know, to people in non-white backgrounds. That's really what I was looking at, because even though, you know, having the content is important, it's also really, really important to know the kind of content that you're implementing work in. So that's my research area, and that's what I'm currently studying.
And my name is Nadiah Mohajir. I am the co-founder and co-executive director of HEART. It is a national nonprofit that efforts to advance reproductive justice and uproot gendered violence for the most impacted Muslims. And we do that through health education, advocacy, research, and training. How I came to this work is kind of like, it depends on where you want to start the story. But you know, I think if I was to start even before like my academic training, I would take you back to when I was in high school, an adolescent, and you know, finding myself in many support roles and like confidant roles for a lot of my friends that were navigating dating and sex and relationships and all the things. And you know, fast forward, I get to college and I start, you know, similarly, I thought I was going to go clinical. I was interested in, I did cancel the pre-med really early, but I did think about nursing for a long time, and then moved on. I discovered public health and fell in love. And just being able to think about, you know, the barriers to information and services, and why certain services work for people and it doesn't work for other communities. That was a question that I became deeply obsessed with. And so I, in that moment, as I was, you know, navigating my academic career, I started interning for the Department of Health and Human Services. And it's weird that this is where that work was born. But my boss at the time was like, I want you to do a campaign or program that is reaching Muslim women and girls. Here you go, here's your budget, you know. And what I learned from that was, you know, we convened a group of moms and daughters to come together and talk about all the things: peer pressure, relationships, sex, puberty. And what, you know, we thought we were just going to move on to the next project. And what really happened was people started asking, when's the next one? When's the next one? And that's when, you know, she encouraged me to do some research and see what was out there, what was happening with mainstream sex ed programs, what was happening with, you know, faith-based sex ed programs. And we truly discovered that there was something missing. And that's sort of how HEART was born. And, you know, taking you back to my story in, you know, of now being that support system for my friends, I now can say what I was missing in that role was asking two very important questions of the people that I was playing support roles for. And that was, are you being safe, and do you feel safe? And that was a lot had to do with, one, my age and my lack of understanding of the world, but more than that, the shame and stigma that I felt even asking those questions of the folks that were navigating those things. And so realizing that now, like, that's really where we are today. This book, the idea itself was born 7 years ago when the co-editors of Love Inshallah approached us to say, you know, there's a lot of people asking about first-time sex. What would it look like for you to create a pocketbook on first-time sex? And we really thought we were going to come up with like a 5-page like toolkit or something. And it turned into this essentially. And it's gone into multiple iterations. It's been rewritten multiple times. We brought in, you know, people like Hadi and like other contributors, medical professionals, scholars of Islamic law, etc., to really create what has been created today. And a really, really beautiful medical illustrator to finish it off.
Thank you both. So I don't think I formally introduced myself. My name is Dr. Alia Azmat. I'm still getting used to that. I'm a counseling psychologist in Decatur and also a postdoc at the Center for Victims of Torture. And I remember when HEART came out with the survey for the first time. And I was like, this is so great. I have so many friends, I'm getting married. I'm gonna like promote this so much. And you know, it took a while, but we're here and we're promoting. And I've just been so excited to see this come to life and to also see it deepen as a project. So thank you both.
Thank you. I also want to give a shout out to Alia because she's one of our longest research assistants and trainers on staff. She joined us back in 2011-ish as a participant in the workshops that we were trying to do. And so it's a testament to her and your leadership as well in helping us kind of build this.
So that's a great segue, I think, into one of my favorite things about HEART, which is your use of acronyms. So Rahma, Rhythm, etc. And there's a number of those in the book. And so I'm wondering if you can just share sort of the role of these acronyms in HEART's work, but also, you know, how you come up with this idea to take a really complex, you know, strategy like active listening or a really complex sort of concept like sexual decision making, and then turn it into not only an acronym that is easy to digest, but also rooted in faith concepts that feel very familiar to me. So if you could just speak to that in your work and also in the book.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. So HEART itself is an acronym, for those of you who don't know, Health, Education, Advocacy, Research, and Training. We are sort of obsessed with acronyms, and so it's an understatement. But really, I think this stems from this notion. A lot of times we get pushback on this work, that this work is not Islamic. And that is in conflict with Islam or with faith in general. And so what we want to do at HEART is a lot of times we push back on that and we say, not only is this not just a product of Western feminism, this work is not only not in conflict with Islam, but it is inherently Islamic. And the ways in which we do that is by reclaiming some of our core Islamic values, like Rahma, which means compassion. And compassion, it was one of the responding with Rahma framework was actually one of the first frameworks that we created back in 2010, 2011, where we were thinking about how do we create a tool to teach peer educators how to respond to sensitive disclosures. So whether it's a sensitive disclosure of, you know, I just was assaulted last night and I don't know what to do, or it was a sensitive disclosure like I just had unprotected sex and now I need to get plan B, or it was, you know, any sort of, sensitive disclosure that may be, how do you create a very easy to understand framework to respond to that disclosure? So that is the Responding with Rahma framework, and that stands for respond by listening, affirm and believe, honor cultural and religious context, maintain privacy, and assist with providing resources. And that is a tool that we have used to train many trainers, educators, community leaders, imams, chaplains, to be able to better respond when they get, especially in the context of sexual assault, for sure, to be able to better respond. And because that's the number one thing that or one of the biggest reasons that people don't come forward is because they don't feel like they're going to be believed, and they're not going to get the resources that they need. And so we believe that everyone should know how to respond with Rahma, and Rahma is, as I mentioned, compassion and one of God's greatest qualities. And so we want to ground our communities in this is Islam, and this is like more than anything else, you have to interact with each other with compassion. And that brings me to the next acronym that's in this book, which I think Hadi should talk about, if that's okay.
I feel like you should go ahead and killing it. Also, I just want to put that, like, Nadiah's brain is just so fantastic. Because, like, I remember, like, you know, when she came up with the Rhythm framework, it was like, wow. And so I think she should just describe it.
So the Rhythm framework is a framework that we basically created a way for people to, like when they're thinking about decision making and when they're thinking about assessing whether or not they want to be in this relationship, whether or not they feel safe in this relationship, whether or not they feel like this relationship is healthy and equitable, we created the Rhythm framework, which is based on the Arabic word, thank you, for it literally translates to fullness of choice, which like you are being in full choice of what you are like agreeing to or consenting to. And so this one is a little bit more complicated of an acronym because there's a lot going on. So it's not like the responding with Rahma, which is like easy to remember. But we are basically saying that our like ethical framework around relationships in that are equitable and fair and all of the things are rooted in Rida, which is R stands for rooted in compassion and pleasure, informed by communication and knowledge, driven by equity and fairness, housed in safety and security, and affirmed in commitment and fidelity. And so this is basically our offering to folks to basically say, okay, I'm trying to assess if I want to be in this relationship. I'm trying to assess if the current relationship that I'm in is healthy. And also all of these qualities or values are also Islamic values. So compassion is rahma, knowledge is ilm, which is, you know, the Arabic word for knowledge. Fairness and equity is adala, which is justice, and the concept of equity and fairness. So we've really tried to connect them to core Islamic values so that people can understand that having a healthy, thriving, pleasurable, compassionate relationship is inherently Islamic, and it is inherently Islamic to also push for gender equity in relationships. So that's it in a nutshell. I don't know if you want to add to that.
That was great.
Thank you. The next thing that I'm curious about is, you know, the book has a lot of great content, but I was surprised that it's also sort of like there's a lot of reflection activities. There's, you know, it kind of feels like a workbook. And if you could just speak to kind of how that came to be and why you all decided to construct the book in that way.
I think one thing that we were really trying to be conscious of is that, you know, as much as there's theory and there's like a lot of clinical stuff, it's really important to be able to take a step back and apply those lessons to, you know, your current situation versus like just, you know, just looking at the theory and just looking at the theory. Like practice is just as important. So we felt like, you know, especially in one of the examples is like when we talk about like, you know, making the decision to have sex, like ensuring that it's affirmed in like your beliefs and just whatever, basically making sure that it's a decision that you came up with yourself. And so it was more like having, you know, making it a bold workbook style situation, ensure that you could have the time to really, you know, think back and fully reflect on your lived realities and your experiences and ensure that, you know, whatever ideas that you have are your own. Because with the book, it's more of like, we're guiding, but we're not necessarily like, here, we're holding your hand and this is what you have to do.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
So you're sort of presenting the information and then letting folks decide what feels comfortable and, to your point, Nadiah, safe to them.
Yeah. And having, you know, having these prompts are a good way to help you think about these ideas and make decisions. Because for me, even I found it just so helpful. Like, you know, you have certain ideas, and even just writing it, just realizing, oh, actually, like, it's good to take a step back and use these prompts to like make more informed choices and decisions.
So as a writer, I think, you know, I'm really curious, what was really hard about writing the book, and maybe what were some of the parts of writing that you found more enjoyable, or maybe that you learned something new or surprising from?
I think one of the hardest bits is presenting ideas that you don't necessarily fully like believe in or adhere to, but realizing that it's still information that needs to be out there. So I brought up the example yesterday, and I'll bring it up today. For me, like, polygamy, writing about that was quite challenging, but like, we knew that it was the lived reality of, you know, so many different people, like, and it would be such an injustice. It would be so unfair to write an entire book about relationships and sex and not discuss certain ideas, even if it's looked at as something that's not positive. You know, just knowing that actually, like, we can put that information out there, and again, make sure that people are making informed decisions and not just decisions that we think are right or we believe in. Mm-hmm. And even to that point, since I brought up polygamy, I think the most enjoyable part for me writing this was around the marriage and divorce sections, because I got to learn so much, and I really enjoyed learning, guys. It's one of those things where like there was so much information that I had no idea about, and writing, you know, doing that research and just learning and putting it out there, I think was so amazing, because as young women, you know, you're as young people in general, like, you're pushed towards marriage, you're told that this is what you have to aspire towards, but then the reality is it's not necessarily an equitable relationship within our cultures and contexts. So just knowing that women, and I know we tend to say women, like, you know, the women have rights in Islam, blah, blah, but like, we don't really know what those rights are. And we don't really, you know, have a full understanding of how to, you know, put those rights into use. So just, you know, putting that out there, having the time to read about it and write about it, and making sure that girls, women, people, just all people have access to that information, I think was really exciting and really helpful for me.
I'm ditto to everything that Hadi said. I think for me it was finding the right balance of everything. Like, I feel like as a Muslim woman, and as a Muslim woman who's trying to occupy the space of gender justice and reproductive justice and gender-based violence and all of that stuff, you're being pulled into multiple directions and being scrutinized by all angles. And so for me, it was finding the right balance and being okay with knowing that I wasn't going to make everyone happy. So, you know, to Hadi's point about, you know, being uncomfortable with polygamy, some folks might think that's not feminist enough that we mentioned that, right? To other people talking about marriage as husband and wife, some folks may think it's not inclusive enough, right? And so, like, there were many times where we had to find the right balance to make sure that we were being fair and being as inclusive as possible, while still recognizing that there are many ideas in this book that people will grapple with and will struggle with and think, well, you're not Muslim enough, you're not feminist enough, you're not this enough, right? Mm-hmm. And for us, this was a book, as Hadi mentioned, about the lived realities of Muslims, regardless of where we fall on the spectrum of our personal beliefs about any number of issues that are in this book.
I feel like that really comes through, because there is just a comprehensiveness to what's discussed. You talk about infidelity, you talk about pregnancy loss, you talk about all the methods of contraception, you talk about temporary marriage, right? And there are things that are happening. And it's no longer this, like, it's not happening so we can't talk about it, or it's happening but we don't know how to talk about it. It's happening, here's some information, let's start having some conversations and be really real about what's happening on the ground. So I just really, really appreciated the depth there of this book.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So I also know that you have collaborated with quite a bit of Muslim scholars, particularly Muslim women scholars. Tell us about that and what it was like to work with folks sort of on the cutting edge of Islamic law and bioethics around these issues.
Yeah, that was, I think, for me, the most fun part of this is it was a way for me to reconnect with my faith and learn like the depth and complexity of scholarship that already exists and the foundation that has been built for us on so many issues pertaining to gender and sexuality. And so for me, it was really important. Like I would say probably the majority of scholars that are quoted in this are people who identify as women, Muslim women, and that is intentional. We recognize that, a lot of the ideas around a lot of the topics in this book have been interpreted and dominated by cishet males, and we wanted to directly challenge that and uplift a lot of the amazing work that has happened by Muslim women scholars. So that was one of a very intentional decision that we made early on to say, no, we're gonna look at what women have said about this issue and what directly impacted folks have said about the issues that we're writing on, because it's important for us, again, back to the thing about this being reflective of lived realities. The people who are the best experts in that are the people who are directly impacted by those issues. And so that's why we made a very intentional decision to center that scholarship.
And I would also, because even Aisha had brought it up yesterday about how, like, with Islamic tradition, Aisha radiallahu anha was a major scholar. Like, she, has all these had basically the most hadiths, compiled. And it's so important that we remember and realize that as Muslim women, we should be scholars and we should be out there getting the information and putting the information in. And there's no hierarchy when it comes to scholarship or learning or any of that. Literally, the first word that came out in Islam is like read. So, and it's gender neutral. So there shouldn't be at any point where we feel like, okay, all information should come from, the man with the beard. Like, it's equally as important, and for all genders and anyone who identifies themselves who wants to be a scholar to go ahead and do the learning and the research. And so just for me, realizing how many brilliant Muslim women are out there doing such amazing work, it was very affirming. And it was also one of those things where, like, a lot of things that you would have wanted to know and learn from the mainstream, you wouldn't get it. And I'm getting all that information that I need from, again, the women or the people that are living that reality. So I thought that was amazing.
Thank you both. I have a final sort of piece that I want to read from the book, because we have been talking a lot about some women, but I'm also curious, where are the men, the non-binary folks? Are they going to benefit from this book? So I wanted to just read a little excerpt and then open it up to you all on who you think this book is for. And this is the hashtag the first time, so like where the origin story really of this book again, our survey respondent. Sadly, this is a quote. Sadly, as a male, my only exposure to the female body beyond sex ed in school was through pornography, which objectifies women. So my first time involved a lot of curiosity about what was real and what was not about a woman's body based on that. I found that the reality and the beauty of physical intimacy made porn completely irrelevant, and thus I never went back to it. So I really appreciated these tidbits and these quotes because, again, I feel like it roots it in the lived reality of folks. I'm curious if there are, thoughts that you have on who this book is for, and particularly what you would want to say to Muslim and non-Muslim men around this book.
Should I go ahead and start? All right. I think the book is for everyone, but especially because. So basically, in my research as well, it's mainly focused on young people, and Gambia has like a 90-something% Muslim population. So the young people I'm talking to are mainly Muslim. And I remember having a focus group discussion with some young men about sex and sex education. And one of the things they kept bringing up is that the idea that they couldn't ask because people assumed that they already knew. Mm-hmm. So, and I would also. One of the things that patriarchy does is that, patriarchy impacts like every single person in every gender, but sometimes we forget the impact that it has on boys and men. And so I feel like this book as like a way to bridge that kind of gap and to start having conversations with people that, one, you assume already know, or two, people that don't even know where to start asking from. Because even just last night, I was with 3 of my cousins. They're all 3 are male. They're like 18, 21, and like 22. And it was one of the first times like we actually sat down and had conversations around sex, even though I'm quite close to them. But it was because like, you know, I showed them the book, and for that, like one of them instantly asked like, is this just for women, or, you know, can everyone benefit from it? Can boys and men benefit from it as well? And I was like, oh, of course. And so like once they opened it and started scrolling around, they had questions, and I'm glad that I was in a position to answer this question. But it was also really good that it was able to start that kind of conversation. So to your point, I think it's for everyone.
And the thing I would add, I know you asked about non-Muslims. I think this book is extremely relevant. I don't think you have to be Muslim to benefit from this book. There are some very specific things in the book, like, for example, around marriage and divorce, that may be very specific to Muslims who are practicing, and, you know, really it matters to them what happens with marriage and divorce law in Islam. But other than that, like the fact that we've grounded the book in a framework that is grounded in universal values that have to do with compassion and justice and equity and safety, those are things that everyone can relate to and sort of create community around. And so I think that definitely this book is useful for all faith groups, all cultural groups. You know, it is written from by all 9 non-white people, so there is that to take into consideration, that there is a lens that we are putting on there that is challenging white feminism and the white sexual liberation sort of movement, and so there's that. But you know, I think that is also something that is useful for a lot of folks.
I would also like to argue that even the marriage book can be used by non-Muslims as well, because a lot of it we talk about basically what kind of partnership you would like to see. So these are conversations that you can have with your partner in terms of, okay, how do we split the chores? How do we split the bills? You know, it's a way to help think around, again, like just how to make your relationships more equitable.
I'm just taking it in. Yeah. You know, I really see it as a valuable therapy tool because it's so workshop or like workbook oriented. Having folks reflect inward and then in community and in partnership, I think is a really phenomenal thing, and truly a gift. So thank you.
I wanna just say something about that too, because we have some staff members who aren't here right now, but have been working with young people directly, like sort of piloting the book and like, you know, creating focus groups and things like that. And I will say, people have shared with us that the book is bringing up a lot of emotions, good and bad, you know, and so actually, you're actually helping us do this, where we're creating a companion guide to this book. It will not be this long, I promise. But we're creating a companion guide to this book of, like, if you are doing this in community with the book club, here are ways that you can do it in a way that's trauma-informed, in a way that if you get a disclosure, this is how you hold the disclosure, how you help people navigate that disclosure, and things like that. Because things are inevitably coming up. People have told me that they received the book in the mail and then they decided they couldn't open it yet, right? Like, there's a lot of stuff happening with people. We were just at a conference with Days On like 2 weeks ago. People were crying when they saw this book. So it's really a beautiful offering, but it's also one that we have to use with care. And so I think it's important that therapists are fully engaged and sort of interacting with this book.
Yeah, I mean, I'll share that I think that's really helpful, right? I think it can be easy to be like, well, this wasn't here, and now the resource is here, and now it's just gonna change everything. Or like, we're just gonna have these conversations and they're gonna be, and it's like, no, there's been so much silence, so much shame, so much blame, so much internalized objectification, silence, all of the things. So even engaging with the book may be challenging. I really, really appreciate you bringing that in.
Thank you.
I don't have anything and want to be mindful of time as well so that we can open it up to folks virtually and in the room. But if there are any final thoughts that are coming up for you two before we do that, I want to give you some space to do that.
I just want to say thank you all for being here.
Yeah, this is lovely. We're so grateful.
So we want to make space for anyone who's here to ask any questions you like. And our folks who are watching virtually at home, we would love for them to ask questions as well. But does anyone want to kick it off for us? Yes.
I was just wondering, what was the most surprising thing you found out while researching that you put in to the book?
For me, that there are 3 types of divorce. That was really cool. There's talaq, khula, and plus, right? If I'm pronouncing it right. Yeah. So I thought that was quite cool because I had mentioned that at lunch earlier that there's always that hadith about how like when you get a divorce, the throne of Allah shakes. It's mainly about talaq, which is like a unilateral divorce, but not the other 2 types of divorce. And so I thought that was really it was a very interesting tidbit, that statement.
For me, it was the section that we did on abortion and termination. We did a lot of research on, what's been written on abortion, and I was really heartened to learn that, pre-colonization, abortion in Muslim societies, abortion was strictly a healthcare decision between pregnant people and their providers. The state really got involved, religious authority really got involved. That, for me, was really important to know, given the work that we do, but also just really made me interrogate what's happening in this country, and how deep the impacts of colonization have been in this country and globally, on just all people just trying to take care of their bodies and make healthcare decisions, and how deep those impacts go. So I think that was one of the biggest things that we found, was that it was never even a debate, and the fact that we're sitting here literally losing friends over it, and family members and beings, and it's become so hyper politicized that there was also sadness that I felt learning that.
Thank you.
Hello, so my name is Turk. Currently I'm pursuing a master's degree to be a mental health therapist. I'm currently working at Atlanta Therapeutic Collective, which is one of their focus is sex therapy. So right now, because I'm queer, it is easy for a female Middle Eastern woman to come to me, to talk to me. But what if I'm 10 years from now, I'm working with straight men to help women, because there is no availability, for example, sex therapists who are female, to help a woman and make her feel warm and comfortable to talk to someone without being feeling ashamed or judged. So how can I be a better therapist? And this question is not just for you. If anyone knows an answer after
I think we have
So,
we have a brilliant therapist.
So, anyone,
I think I just want to clarify the ask. So is the concern that there are so many women going to men therapists, or that there aren't enough sex therapists?
there are not enough sex therapists, and for example, right now I'm the only Middle Eastern and who speaks Arabic in my private practice. So, and usually women want that connection to someone who could understand the cultural. Good. I'm lucky to have the queer card.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then they say, oh, he's safe.
I can bridge the gap between the two, but what if,
Yeah, I mean, it's a complex question, and I feel like there's multiple questions within it.
we can talk later.
So, yeah, maybe, I think there do need to be more sex therapists. So if there are I like the head nod. If there are resources, if there's interest here, we can start talking, we can start investing, we can start doing research. I think this is extremely valid and important. And then the queer identity and the safety piece, I don't want to erase that part, but I think about it a little bit more globally around what does it mean for a non-white person to see a white provider, right? So there's safety and harm and these questions that are being asked and need to be asked in even more nuanced ways, the way that you are asking them. So I think I don't have an answer, and I would also be open to hearing people's thoughts. But I think that piece is important to name, that inherent in the therapeutic relationship, there is not always safety, and there is immediate trust sometimes with certain identities and with certain ways people present. And that's valid for therapists and non-therapists and folks that are going to therapy and not going to therapy. It's a part of the dynamic.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question.
So Shazia at home has a question. Will this be translated into languages other than English?
We have gotten this question so much, and Dazan asked it just last week. So there are portions of the book that are right now being translated. It's like, this book is very long. It's very small portions of the book that are being translated right now. In order to translate this book in a more comprehensive way, we need money and somebody to invest in it. And so, it's a feat in and of itself. And then the other question is, what language do you pick? Because Muslims speak basically every language, right? So, and then the other question of script. So if translating this book into Spanish is not going to be as big a haul in terms of design as it is if you do Arabic or Urdu, right? Because the script is completely different. And so there's a lot of things that we've already kind of talked about that we're thinking about, if we actually do the heavy lift of translation, that in and of itself is going to be a full-time job and to manage all of that because of all these questions that I've just named. So
this would be a great time to drop that donation. So if folks want to give money to Heart, how can they do that?
yes, www.hearttogrow.org/donate.
All right. I do have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, good evening. I was wondering if the book is talking about sexual pleasure, because we
Yes.
always talk about the difficulties and dangerous parts, but
Yes, so we do have sections on sexual pleasure and also resources to learn more about sexual pleasure. The other thing that we've done is really make a big emphasis on female sexual pleasure, because a lot of the Muslim resources and also non-Muslim resources that are out there really focus on male sexual pleasure. And so we really wanted to make sure that we included a lot of resources of where to go for female sexual pleasure. And also, for example, Habiba Kande is a British writer, a British Muslim man writer, and he writes a lot on female pleasure. And so we reference his work and talk a little bit about some of the techniques that he's talked about in terms of achieving orgasm and things like that. And also talk about how there's 18 spots for female orgasm and things like that. So it's not a how-to manual though. So we don't talk about positions.
There's no diagram.
Yeah, there's no diagrams.
No, I didn't thought my book.
There are resources where you can get those diagrams, but it's not.
My students stole my question, which was going to be about there is an illiteracy around not just sex what it is, but also pleasure. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that there is a lot of mention about pleasure, because it isn't just about not having STDs or not getting pregnant
Right.
or not getting AIDS, but it is about, you know, how do you get pleasure, and that's what's missing in sex ed education. Like they teach you how to use a condom, but you know,
That's about it.
that's
Yeah.
about it, and then don't get pregnant, and you know, don't
Or
get
don't
an
do
STD.
it.
It's fear
Don't
based.
do it.
Or don't do it.
It's very fear based and it's very abstinence based, and we're trying to move away from that because I think we both have public health backgrounds and we know that abstinence based sex education doesn't work. So it was definitely something that you know, as much as we do talk about abstinence in the book, it's very important to highlight the realities that that's really not the case fully. So we do talk about, you know, sex from a pleasurable perspective, and I remember we wrote that section about the different types of orgasms. We did that, right?
And masturbation.
And masturbation, and you know, all of the things that we shouldn't, well, people think we shouldn't be talking about. We talk about it. We'll always talk about it.
So, thank you. So much appreciative. I know I've been saying this for like 2 weeks ever since we ran to this. It's done! So 2 things. And one, it just dawned on me, and I'm gonna hold on to that for just a second. The first one is there are 3 authors. And I just want to make sure we bring Nadiah into this.
Yes, thank you.
I don't know if she's online, but I just want to make sure we bring her into the space, because when we were talking a week ago, there was another piece, when we talked about who's the book for, there's a whole nother piece that Nadiah brought in, just in terms of people with different identities, people with different sexual identities and gender identities, and how that fits inside Muslim culture, Muslim tradition, the community work that had to be done, and how that was navigated for this book. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that, especially for queer women, lesbian, bisexual, and trans identified women in the Muslim community, and how this book is relevant for them. That would be my first one. And to bring, of course, Nadiah to
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for bringing Nabila in. She has been so critical in the writing of this book. And you know, she herself will say that this book was transformative for her and her own relationship with her identity and her you know, navigating conversations with family and things like that. You know, I'm actually losing my train of thought of like what your question actually is, but how we navigate in community. You know, a lot of the, you know, this transcends the book. I think doing this work in general, you lose a lot of community doing this work, and you gain a lot of community doing this work. And I think part of the biggest gift that we've been given at Heart is the community that we've been able to find. And as you know, like Hadi and Alia are sitting, you know, next to me. These are like my 2 long-term staff, right? Like they've been with us forever. And so there's also something special happening with this work that binds people together. And so, you know, we did lose community doing this work. There were people who said, you know, we can't support this, and we can't, you know, we don't agree with the ideas in this book, etc. And then there were other people who were like, we actually really believe in what you're doing, and let us like help you in all the ways. You know, let us help you by connecting you to the right networks, by connecting you to the right scholarship, by you know, finding the right medical professionals to like, you know, that are also Muslim, that can you know, bring in that clinical eye and say, this is what we've seen in the exam room. These are the questions that come, right? So I think navigating community has been something that we've been doing even, you know, beyond this book as we continue this work. And, you know, it's, it comes with its challenges, but it also, the right people just seem to fall into your lap. And that's what's incredible to me, is just like, we don't have to work too hard to find the people that love us. And
I think even like with community, I'll go a step before that and talk about like just defining the self as well. And for me, again, like, you know, as a Muslim coming from a very traditional background, like I always struggled with this idea that I could work in sex ed or teach sex ed and still be a good Muslim. And so just learning to define what exactly a good Muslim is was so important because it helped connect me to the right people. Like I felt like, okay, actually I'm not burning the pits of hell because I decided to tell somebody to use a condom if they want to have sex, you know? So I think it was very important to just, you know, journeying into myself and really realizing like what my relationship with Allah is and how, you know, finding other like-minded people that want to do the work and also still have the same belief in, you know, in Allah, in the kindness of Allah, in the all-encompassingness of Rahma and all that great, wonderful stuff.
And people that interrogate you. Like I would say our editor, Dr. Asifa, was brilliant at that. Like she was one who would push us and say, is this really what you mean? Say what you mean. Let's say what you mean, right? And like and really interrogate what we were trying to say and how we wanted to say it and who we wanted to say it to and like all of those things. And then we would interrogate her, be like, you know, we don't really agree with what you're saying here. And, you know, and so it was kind of like a mutual community that we had kind of developed in order to get to where we are today.
It was really cool. Just like her attitude was amazing. It was so cutthroat. She thought she was being mean, but it was a great learning opportunity. And again, like just making sure that we were firm in everything that we were saying and that we could back it up. This is one thing to, you know, just say whatever you want to say because that's what you believe in, but like, do you have the information for it? Do you have the facts to be able to say, yeah, we said this and this is where it came from, and like, you know, cite whatever it is that we needed to cite. So just having that kind of push was so important.
Mm-hmm. We became citation monsters.
Yes.
That's also a good thing. The second part of it is just it's okay, it's a days on moment. So we had this conversation, we've been talking about it, we had a really great conversation. And we even realized that we connected because you're from Gambia. The person I married was from Senegal. And it never even dawned on me to have this conversation about being a person who never converted, but was married to a Muslim, who very much loved him until he died. But we were separated, we divorced, we went through all of that, we're still, you know, like this. And never did it dawn on me how relevant the book is directly to me. And people like that in those relationships. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that. That's another who this book is for. It's for so many different people for whom your cultural connections are not the same. Your upbringing, your religious beliefs are not necessarily the same. You transcended that because of the relationship, but that's still there and it's in it and it's a part of it. And that this is another tool to help navigate those relationships as well. So one more time, thank you. For real, thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Dazon. Do we have time for another question?
We do, yeah.
I have somewhat of a selfish bias question. I was wondering what sort of research you found pertaining to like Muslim women specifically, that's included in the book, and just sort of like specificities that you can maybe share with us.
What topic? Yeah.
In terms of, I don't know, sexual relationships, and she mentioned pleasure, but like how in depth do you kind of go into it, and what sort of like findings have you found in Muslim women, and how in their relationship with sex, how they see it, and like anything that's kind of like was stark, but also just very common.
Yeah, I think so somebody else asked like what was the most surprising thing that you learned. So chapter 1, we talk about our Rhythm framework and why we're grounding ourselves in this framework. And we go to the prophetic times and talk about what self-determination looked like for women in the prophetic time, in the time of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, right? And we found stories that literally, like our minds were blown, but we found stories that were talking about how women would actively, without needing permission from their family, without needing permission from their male relatives, offering themselves to the Prophet, peace be upon him, for marriage, and also like repudiating that offer after they were married, right? And that I thought was really interesting to us, because we really saw that is as an agency that women had in those times to be able to do that, and then also to be like saying like, no, I changed my mind, right? And like I remember reflecting this to Hadi, like imagine saying that to the Prophet of God, right? Like we believe that this is like the prophet of God, and like this woman is like, no, I changed my mind, and I don't want to marry you. And the fact that he was like, okay, cool. Like, I totally respect that, right? And that is another reason why this book is so important for boys and men to read, because I think it really challenges our ideas around what toxic masculinity, or what a man is, right? And to be able to take no from somebody who has either married you or about to marry you or whatever, and say, I changed my mind, or like even the Ridha word itself is based on scholarship from Rahma, who the former ED is sitting right here. But they found a story of the prophet's wife on their wedding night, where he went and they were going to, and she said no. Yes, exactly. And she said no. And again, he walked away and he said, it's okay, it's cool, like, maybe tomorrow, right? And so the fact that that kind of agency was practiced during the time of the prophet, and that now we have, like, in so many contexts, that agency does not exist, whether we're talking in a marital context or not, I think for me was really important to learn.
I'd also would like to add that, like, that even though, like, we do fill the book with like Muslim women scholars and all that, there's still not enough research done around Muslim women's lives. And if any of y'all want to go into research, it's a great field to get into. But I hope Nadia answered your question, but I think it's also still important to know that there's still a lot more to learn about women and Muslim women in general, and it's something that we hope that like future editions of this book can cover as well. When we have more, pages.
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I think, like, so I was actually surprised by your answer just now, because I'm like, oh, right, research is also looking back at history and seeing what was done prior. Because when I heard the question, I was like, yeah, so sexual pleasure and women and age, and what's the moderator and what's the mediator. And so I think in that regard, I'm even challenged, my assumptions are being challenged right now in that type of research. And there's not a lot out there. I mean, I just did my dissertation on Muslim women's experiences in therapy at university counseling centers. And there's, I remember when Dr. Sylvia Ali's article came out about sex and shame and Muslims having sex and Muslims having sex outside of marriage. It was groundbreaking, because it was research, or psychology research, which is my field, talking about it, creating the moderators, the mediators, and making those claims and discussions. So there's just so much to be done. Back to the point around sex therapy and training, but there's just more research to be done in that regard, and in this going back and re-examining our history and the empowerment and the liberation in our history.
What have you found to be, like, if you could list like the top 3 challenges that Muslim women face in terms of like having a healthy relationship with sex? Is it like not being educated enough? Is it not having the confidence? Is it shame? Like, what would you say the top? Yeah, I figured.
Well, I want to circle back to something that when I first started with Heart also would come up, which was like, I feel like in the workshops, it was always like, is oral sex halal or haram? Okay, it's like very specific around like, I just need permission to do this thing, instead of this like broader, like sort of Ridha framework around, okay, like what's important to you? Do you feel safe in this relationship? Do you want to engage in this sexual practice? Are you comfortable doing this outside of the span of marriage, right? So there's this like,
or even in your marriage,
and so it feels like to me, at least back then, that it was a lot of like, just tell me what to do, rather than, and I still experience this from the community work, rather than I think I need to think about how I actually want to engage in my faith and how I actually want to show up in this world and how I want to show up in my partnership. Plus the shame. I think that's just always
Can I
there.
add to that?
Yeah.
There's always this idea that female sexuality is a bad thing. Like women are not supposed to want to have sex. Women are not supposed to desire, have desires or pleasure or any of that sort. And I think that's one of the main things as well, because even within marriages, you're not really taught that, okay, I'm speaking from a very Gambian perspective, where like on your wedding night, they literally sit the woman down for hours to tell her like this and this and this is what's supposed to happen, and this is how you're supposed to make your husband happy, but nothing about like what she wants and what makes her happy or what gives her pleasure at all. So it's just, I guess, trying to destigmatize the conversations that we have about sex and about pleasure, and especially for women, and just being okay with the fact that like women are sexual beings. Like women want to have sex too, and that's completely fine, and it's not anti-Islamic or anything of that sort. It's just the reality.
Do you want to
Thank you. I have a comment and then a question. So one of the things that is circling my brain as all of these questions are coming in this last sort of thread is, and I think Nadiah said this earlier when she was talking about how people started to disclose things to her from their personal relationships. So one of the things that I think is fascinating about community and Muslim women community, one of the things that I've enjoyed in the work that I do is when people know the work that you do, you end up getting kind of disclosures about the first time you had sex or, pain and sex. I didn't realize how many Muslim women were going to sex therapists. I don't know if our therapist friend is still here. Yes. So, and going to white therapists who maybe didn't understand, I will share, I don't know if it's a live stream, my mom will probably like, what's going on? But the first time I went to an OBGYN, my doctor asked if I'd ever used a tampon. Like, could she do an examination? And would I feel comfortable with penetration? And I thought that was just a really insightful question for a provider to ask, because honestly, I wasn't even sure, what was going to happen. But only in private conversations with friends. One of my husband's running jokes is, given the work that you do, I'm surprised that you don't talk to your friends more. I talk to Nadiah about this all the time. Why don't you talk about sex more with your friends and with your peers if you're not maybe comfortable talking about it in a public forum? So what I will ask is, especially from a marital perspective, I know that in Islam, privacy in marriage is very valued, and talking about it's more than a stigma or a shame. It's something that's actually quite beautiful, this idea of respecting your marriage bed and respecting the relationship that you have with your partner. How do you navigate that when so much of this is so intimate, and we're talking about making it more public and having more discourse, which I agree is very important? And how do you kind of navigate that?
It's a really good question.
I'm not married.
I think that's a really good question, and I think one thing that we like to talk a lot about at Heart is that there's a difference between privacy and modesty and shame, right? And oftentimes we conflate the two, and they don't need to be conflated. So you can still be modest and private about your sex life, and not feel shame, and reach out for help when you need it. You can talk to your doctor, you can talk to a trusted adult, a trusted friend, right? And there are ways to do it that don't compromise the intimacy of your relationship. No one's asking you to get graphic, unless, I guess if there's a serious sexual dysfunction situation happening, I suppose you might need to get graphic, right? But you do that with the right trained professional, and they maintain your privacy, and it's not like, on Facebook, it's totally fine, right? And so I think that's one thing that we have to recognize. Now, the other thing that I do want to comment is, because these issues are conflated, modesty and privacy and shame, we have created a culture of gossip around some of these issues. And so when people do have problems and they do reach out to their auntie in the community, that auntie, instead of helping, may instead gossip about it. Even if she doesn't say Aisha came to me, right? Even if she doesn't say that, she might give enough details that people still know that Aisha is the one who came to her. And so that in and of itself also prevents people from actually seeking help when they need it. And so that's what I'll say, is that we've created this. And I think also with unconventional, I don't even want to say unconventional, I want to say, you talked about this in a marital context, but we know that sex is happening out in non-marital context. We know sex is happening in same-sex context, etc. Those folks are even more fearful of talking about their relationships because they know that their relationships and their confidence will not be kept private. And I think that is something that we need to consider too, is how many of our people are in unhealthy relationships before marriage, or in trouble, or navigating something really, really, hard and devastating, but they're doing it alone simply because we haven't created the safe spaces in our communities to be able to talk about these and still not violate someone's privacy.
And even then, sometimes privacy is just a way to continue any kind of abuse. So it's just a conduit, or it's something that we use to keep stuff on the hush hush. But the reality is, I feel like certain matters should not really be kept private, especially
Shoulding is shaming. So if you're saying you shouldn't talk about that, or you should keep that within the home, or you should, I'll just add shoulding is shaming, and that's something to pay attention to.
Aparna, do you have a?
No.
Okay, you're just holding them. So we have a couple of just logistical questions, but I'll ask one question, which is, we know that when you kick down the door of a topic just from being a long-time bookseller at Charis, then people are, voraciously desiring even more things, right? So I'm imagining that people now will be wanting a book for younger readers. And in fact, some people have already asked, oh, so can I bring my 11-year-old daughter to this event? I said, you can, but it's geared towards older teens and adult women. So do you have any ideas about potentially doing a book for younger readers?
Why not? I think I feel like we're all so passionate about this work and just seeing how we can reach as much people as possible. And also it's so important to understand that with sex education, there's no such thing as too young. It's just making sure that you're adapting the information to the right age group. So I believe that we are very open to adapting this for a much younger population, and for much older people as well, if they don't see themselves in the book, and just finding more ways to spread the information and spread joy.
We know that there would be a major audience.
Oh, I was just gonna ask, do you have books available today, or?
Yes.
Yeah. So books are here. Books are also available online. And we have two more sort of logistical questions. One is, will there be workshops or classes offered in the future around this book?
Yes, and Sabrine.
I can answer
Yes.
that. So my name is Sabrine Mohammed. I'm the ATL heart individual, and I work closely with Aisha too. So yeah, inshallah, so the book just launched last month, but we do have a lot of upcoming workshop development that will happen this fall, and we're hoping spring we will kind of do a series of workshops. So anyone wants to collaborate or work together, Raksha, of course, SisterLove, of course. But anyone here who wants to come, even we're taking volunteers, we're collaborating with the Feminist Women's Health Center and their repro justice campaign. So we're taking volunteers. Anyone wants to sign up and help us and all the fun stuff coming up. So
what's the best way for folks to get in touch?
Via email.
Info at heart.
Yeah.
womenandgirls.org.
Yep. Our Instagram, heart
At Heart to
to
Grow.
Grow. Yep. That's where you can reach us. And if anyone wants to connect, you can have my phone number. Just
come up.
And then the last question is, you mentioned the guidebook, the companion guidebook. Can we expect it soon? Folks are ready.
2024.
No. The companion guidebook is meant to be literally like 5 pages. Like we just want like really high level guidelines for people who are really excited to lead this. So we're hoping in the next, this year. Yes.
All right, you heard it here first, before the end of the year.
And I want to pitch for the folks that were curious about the developmental stuff or for younger folks. I mean, Heart has been creating content for years. So go to the website, go on resources. There's a book called How to Have the Sex Talk with Your Kids. It's been written. There's lots of content that has been developed already. Just please go see it. I think Sabrina has something.
Since it's back to school and it's fall, we have a back to school campaign. You can check out our website. If you want to be on our email listserv too, just let us know and we can add you for that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you all so very much.
Well, thank you for having us. This was lovely.
This is a room with a lot of power. We're grateful to everyone watching at home. We're going to say goodbye to all of you, but not before you have the opportunity to click this teal button to buy the Sex Talk, the Muslim's Guide to Healthy Sex and Relationships from Charis. We do appreciate you, and be sure if you are able to donate to Heart to help support the translation work, that is very important as well. Thank you all for watching.